I'm going to talk with the AP students about the new style AP questions and the analyzing text multiple choice questions. And we'll work through a couple of the sample ones that the College Board has provided us. Go ahead and get started with the AP class and those mapping the or analyzing text multiple choice. See, I'm already so excited about it. So let's see what we've got here. So the new multiple choice, here's what they say about it. And this is just new for this year. I took it from the brand new College Board thing that they gave us this year that kind of tells us a little bit about what we should expect on this new style exam. So they say that we should get 3 to 4 sets of these types of questions, and they'll include quantitative data such as data tables, charts, graphs, things like that. That's one of the reasons we work so heavily on making graphs and looking at graphs in this class, because we want you to be a pro at graphs and data tables and things like that. These practices are just like, they're like College Board word for standards. And then you'll get 3 or 4 sets with qualitative data or information. So if you remember quantitative, that's going to involve numbers. What is going on here? Oh dear. Let's see. Uh-oh. Okay, well that worked. Now, let's see if I can. Nope, it's not letting me draw. Excellent. Let's see, it will let me type. Yes, it will let me type. So I'll write numbers here. And then qualitative is, oh, right, it's not going to let me. Qualitative is words. So I mentioned this to the Oceanography kids last week, but when I was in college, I wrote a paper and I won an award for it. And the award was the quantitative research. And then someone from like the won a qualitative research. It was literally, oh good, it's working now. It was literally at that moment that I realized meant numbers and qualitative meant words. I'd always gotten them confused before. I know that's, I was in college, that's kind of embarrassing, but, and then the way that I remember it now is that N, quantitative has an N in it and it's about numbers, and qualitative has lit in it, which is like literature, and literature is like all about words and writing and stuff. And so that's how I remember those two. It's kind of lame, but, you know. So that'll be like models, representations, maps, things like that. And then 2 of them will involve like text-based sources, and those questions will assess practice 3, but they can also assess practice 1, 6, or 7. And again, those are like standards. So the 2019 exam, that was last year's exam. It had 100 questions, and you had an hour and 30 minutes to do that, and it was 60% of your exam score. And there were no text-based stimulus, and each question had 5 options, so they don't do that anymore. Instead, you get 80 questions, and you still get the same amount of time to answer them, and it's still worth the same amount of your grade, but you do have this analyzing text type question, and so they'll want you to they'll like write something for you, and then they'll have you answer it, and you'll have an equal emphasis on analyzing quantitative data and data in the form of models and representations, and each question only has 4 options. So to me, that at least just that last part makes me think, okay, I have a 25% chance of randomly getting the answer right instead of a 20% chance of randomly getting the answer right. So if anything else, that's good. And while we're on that topic, let me talk about how I think you should approach these questions. Since you have 4 choices for each one, A, B, C, or D, I like my students to pick, and that's what I call it, your safety letter. And the safety letter is the letter that you choose for a multiple choice question if you literally have no idea how to answer it. Like, no clue, like, where did this question even come from? I don't even know how to answer it. I'm just at a complete loss. You'll use your safety letter for that one. So if my safety letter is B, I will always put B for those questions that I just have no clue. We do not suggest that you do like the Christmas tree, or you go, the first one you have no clue, put A, the second one you have no clue, put B. You're more likely to get the question right when you're guessing if you use the same letter every single time that you guess. So use your safety letter. The other thing is, if there's any way that you can narrow it down, so let's say the choices are A, B, C, and D, and you know that the answer B is just completely ridiculous. There's no way B could be the answer. Obviously, don't use your safety letter then. You can have a backup safety letter, whatever you want to do, but if you can narrow the choices down at all, obviously do that. But if you just literally have no clue, use the safety letter. So let's look at this question. This question is a graph. So they're going to want you to, look at this graph, analyze it, answer stuff about it. And there's a couple questions about this graph. And so let's check this out. So the first thing it says is it's the September Arctic Ocean ice extent from 1979 to 2008. Okay, so that's what they're saying there. And then your graph, they've got your data, and then they've got this nice dotted best fit line. That's really a great example of a best fit line, actually. Sorry, that's neither here nor there. It's just I kind of have a thing about best fit lines. It's a weird science thing, I guess. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this how do I say this? I'm going to look at this graph, and I'm going to look at the question that they asked me. So the question says, based on the data in the graph, by approximately what % did the sea ice decrease from 1980 to 2005? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this graph, and I'm going to go to 1980. So you can see it's 78 is the first one, 79 is the next one, 80 is this one. And I'm going to draw a line all the way up. Okay. And then the other one that they asked for is 2005. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw a line all the way up to the 2005 data point. Okay. Now the 1980 data point is it's like what, 7.9, and the 2005 data point is, if you need to, use your pen to draw across so you don't get messed up with the line. There's no shame in that, right? You want to get the right answer regardless of, what you have to do that. So let's see. So now what I'm going to do is, what does it say? By what % did the sea ice decrease from 1980 to 2005? If you have no clue, pick your safety letter and go on. Okay? If you have no clue, just pick your safety letter and move on. Don't think about it again. If you literally have no clue how to answer that, there's no way you know how. I got to still not know. Pick your safety letter and go on. Don't waste your time analyzing it. If you really want to analyze it, come back to it at the very, very end, but do everything else. Because another thing about the AP exam is that the questions are randomized. So the easiest question is not first, and the hardest question is not last. It is very, very possible that you could get the hardest question on your entire test that they only expect the kids with 5s and maybe not even those kids to be able to answer. That may be the very first question on your test, which would really stink. That's not going to help your motivation or your self-esteem or whatever. But it's very possible that very most difficult question could be the very first one. And then the last question could be like, who wrote Silent Spring, which is like, they have that on almost every single exam, and you'll learn that answer soon if you don't already know, but the answer is Rachel Carson. That could be your very last question. So the very easiest question could be the last one. So don't think that, oh gosh, I have to finish this one, because if I can't do this one, how am I going to answer the rest of the test? Because that's not true. You could be stuck on the question that's for the kids that get the 5, and it's trying to, tease out that 4 to 5 range, or like 5 in the very top score. Because even the kids that get 5s don't have to get a perfect score. So don't feel there are questions that they just expect most kids won't answer or know how to answer, and it stinks, but it's the way it is. So don't feel bad if your very first question or you just have no clue. So for this one though, if we want to see what percent the sea ice decreased from 1980 to 2005, I would put 1980 on the bottom, which is 7.9. And then I would put my 5.5 on the top. And I'm just going to divide those two. Okay, and you get a calculator. So that's why they have these not perfect numbers, because you get the calculator. So don't, feel bad using it, because you do get one now. And that's going to be 69.6%. Okay, so we could round that up to 70 if we really wanted to. That didn't work out that well. Okay, so that's how much they're the same, basically. So we want to know how much the sea ice decreased. So we're going to do 100 minus 70 equals 30%. Okay. And then we'll see what answer that was. Okay, so that answer is B. Okay, you could do 100 minus 69.6, and, because it says approximate, so that's like about. So, you might get 29 point whatever. I'm not a math, 29.4 or whatever, 30.4. And that's okay. You just pick the closest one. So that's that one. And you see that one, it requires you to look at the graph, and then it requires you to do some math. Okay? So now let's go to the next one. Okay, this next one says, which of the following is the most likely consequence of the trend for the change in sea ice shown in the graph, creating a positive feedback loop in the Arctic? So these are kind of the two things that you need to look at, most likely consequence and positive feedback loop. So a positive feedback loop is basically something that's going to keep happening over and over and over. Let me see. I'm going to look up the official definition of positive feedback loop so I can give you a good one. Okay, so it's a process that occurs in a feedback loop which the effects of a small disturbance on a system include, and they increase, and it makes it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Okay. So, for example, when your sea ice melts, then you have less reflectivity, because sea ice is really reflective. So since you have less reflectivity, you're not going to get as much heat reflected back into the atmosphere like we want, so that instead that heat's going to get more absorbed, right, which is going to make the ocean warmer, and then which is going to cause more ice to melt, which means we have even less reflective surfaces because the ice is reflective, and so the ocean's going to get even hotter, which is going to cause more ice to melt, which means we have even less reflective surfaces, which means the ocean's going to get hotter, and you see it's just going to keep going, and worse and worse and worse. Okay, so the big thing that we're looking for here is we need like less reflective and we have a really awesome science term for this, which, we haven't learned yet in this course because, we're at the beginning. But the science term for this is like albedo. So if it's less reflective, you're going to have a lower albedo. Okay, and then we also are going to have more heat absorption. By the ocean. Okay, now I'm going to show you when I did these myself to kind of test myself on them. Here's what I did. If you have a lower albedo, that means all the choices that say increasing albedo cannot be right. So I'm going to cross off anything that says increasing albedo because we know that we need a lower albedo. And the other thing we know is that we need more heat absorption. Okay, so anything that has less heat absorption, I'm going to cross that out too. Okay, now do you see that there is only one choice that doesn't have anything crossed out on it? That means that's the correct choice. Okay, so, and that's how I answer questions like that. I'm like, I know this part is right, and I know this part is right, and I'll write on my test because you can write on your test, and I'll just cross them out. And then I'll just look for the one that's not crossed out because sometimes, if you just read the question, you kind of get it like confused in your head, or it's like there's a lot of, because this one has two different parts and you've got this weird word albedo, which is kind of a weird word, and, you want decreasing and increasing, so I just look at the albedo part and then I look at the ocean part and I pick the choice that doesn't have anything crossed out. And that's what I know is the right answer. Okay, so that's how you would answer a set like this. Now let's look at this one. This one has a little bit of text for you to read. It's not like an English test where you've got like this, huge passage to read. It's just like basically a sentence. Okay, so it's not a ton to read. It's not a ton to read. But they do expect that you know what Chernobyl was, which by the end of this course you should. Chernobyl is, a pretty important thing in the course, and you should know about Chernobyl in this course. And you should know about the problems with Chernobyl, the environmental problems. So let's look at these two questions that are basically about this little piece of text, which is literally one sentence. Okay, so this question says, a meltdown in which of the following structures in a nuclear power plant, such as Chernobyl, would most likely lead to the accidental release of radiation? Okay, so they're testing you on two concepts here. They're testing you on, do you know the basics of a nuclear power plant? And do you know which part of, in addition to knowing these basics, do you know where the radioactive substances in the power plant are stored? Now, by the end of this course, that shouldn't be too difficult of a concept for you because, we'll discuss this and you'll have an assignment about a nuclear power plant and all of that. Okay, so in this one, the cooling tower is basically where there's cold water to try and cool that that reaction that produces heat. It produces energy and heat, and that's what powers the generators. So the cooling tower is not where we put the nuclear radiation. Okay, the turbine and the generator, that's the part that makes electricity. That has nothing to do with the radioactive part. Okay, so we're going to take that out. And then the only thing left is the reactor, which luckily that is the place where the radioactive isotopes are stored. And I'm just going to write that on here in case you guys are rewatching these videos to prepare for the AP exam. You'll have that little bit of that little tidbit there. Okay. Now, the next part says, which of the following best describes, so they have best, describes the process of electricity generation at a nuclear power plant. Okay, so they want to know if you know how a nuclear power plant generates electricity. And they're not looking for a super detailed explanation because, look, it's 2 sentences, okay? They just want to know if you know the basics, okay? So part A says nuclear power is generated through fission, which releases a large amount of heat. The heat is used to generate steam, which turns a turbine and powers the generator. Fortunately, that is the right answer. Fission is how nuclear power plants work, okay? And if you remember from biology, in fission, you may have heard of like a type of reproduction. There was a worm which, after second thought, I'm not going to draw that worm because sometimes I'm not a great artist and sometimes it doesn't look very good when you draw it. But anyway, fission is when you have something, let's say we have a cell and it breaks into 2. Okay, that's fission. It's breaking apart. So that's what's happening in nuclear power. The next choice says nuclear power is generated when photons, okay, so that's light. Photons are basically, it's a physics word for light, are converted to a direct current using a semiconducting material such as silicone. Silicone's a pretty key here, and I'll tell you why in a second. And then an inverter is used to convert the direct current electricity to alternating current. Okay, so since we have light, this is going to be what type of electricity is generated using light, okay, right? Solar power, and the panels for solar power are usually made out of silicone. So that's why I said the silicone is kind of a giveaway there too. So those are the 2 words that give that away. That is not nuclear power, right? That's solar power. Okay, the third choice. Nuclear power is generated from the thermal energy of the Earth. As soon as I read that, I knew it was definitely not nuclear power. And we can talk about the rest of it, but that's not going to be the nuclear power one. That is geothermal energy. Which again, we will discuss this more in the course. And then, these answers will be a little easier for you. Don't feel overwhelmed now, right? This is someone that is supposed to have gone through the entire course, should be able to answer these questions. Not necessarily someone who's gone through, a couple units. Not even the energy unit, especially. Nuclear power is generated from the combustion of mined uranium, which provides enough heat to power a generator. And then the generator turns a turbine to create electricity. So they're talking about uranium here, but that's not what's going. We don't burn the uranium. That would be pretty crazy. I don't know what would happen if we did that, but I don't know that I'd want to be there for that. Okay, and then there's another question, and I don't think I put it on here. Oh, I did, yes. Okay, this is the last question about Chernobyl, supposedly. So this one says that there's a soil sample that pick a different color, was found to contain 187, you don't even have to know what this unit is, you can just say 187, whatevers, you don't even have to try and say it, of cesium-137. If the half-life of cesium is approximately 30 years, how much cesium will remain in the sample after 90 years? So there's a couple ways to do this formula. There's a really difficult one that I see like in all the physics textbooks, but I'll show you how I do it because it's super easy. I just do 187, and then I do an arrow, and that arrow represents 30 years. And I'm just going to divide 187 by 2, and I'm going to get 93.5. Okay, so after 30 years have passed, we have 93.5 whatevers of cesium. Okay, then I'm going to divide 93.5 again, and that's another 30 years going by. And I'm going to divide it again by 2. And I'm going to get 46.75. Okay, that's 60 years have gone by, so I need to do one more. Okay, I'm going to put a 30 on top. That just reminds me that each one's supposed to be 30 years. And again, I'm going to divide this 46.75 divided by 2. and I'm going to get 23.38 whatevers of cesium. Okay, so we can do 30, 60, 90. That's 90 years. It's 23.38, so we need to look for that as our answer. Okay, so that's the way I would approach a half-life problem, and that's what you can call it. If you want to try other half-life problems, we've got some in the course for you, but you can also just like Google like half-life problems, and you know they're all over the place because it's a pretty common type of problem that you learn in like physical science and physics and AP environmental science. And then our last problem, this one again, we have a two-sentence set of text. It's a really long text passage, and then we've got this picture, and then they have a question about it. And it says, scientists are interested in determining the average number of species that have migrated from the mainland. So I'm going to underline that. Average number of species that have migrated from the mainland to a group of islands is shown below. Partway through their study, they decide to include an additional island in their study group. So that's this guy. Okay. Based on the theory of island biogeography. Oh, I can't even say that today. So this is basically the concept they're testing in this question. Which of the following explains how the scientists' calculation of average number of species would change with the inclusion of the new island in their study? So let's talk a little bit about island biogeography since you guys probably don't know a lot about it. I'm going to go not into a lot of detail about it, but enough to help you answer the question. So basically the mainland is going to have a lot of species, and I'm going to draw these with shapes because, yeah, I can't draw animals. So all of my animals are shaped like shapes, okay? Now, as these islands form, something happens and will make whether the animal, like it's a bird and it gets, lost at sea or whatever, and it ends up on the island, or if you have like an animal and it gets, there's a storm and it gets stuck on like a log or something and makes it over to the island, whatever. Okay, that's how these species are getting here. And the closer the island, typically the more diversity it's going to have, the more different species it's going to have because it's so close to the mainland, so there's been more chances for species from the mainland to get there because they are closer. This new additional island, right, in order for a species to have to get there, it would have to either miss all of these islands and end up over there, or it would have to go from one of these islands that already had a few species to that island. Okay, so those are the two ways that that island could get species. Okay, so because it's even farther away than all the others, typically we think in island biogeography that it's going to have less species than either the mainland or that closer group of islands. So this one's going to have very few different species, typically. Or at least not as many as the mainland or the closer islands. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking for in these choices that they've given us. Okay, we're going to look for that kind of information. So it says the average would increase because more species would have migrated directly to the farther island. Okay, I don't like that one because it says the average would increase and it says more species. So I'm going to cross that part off because I'm not really thrilled with that part, right? That's not typical island biogeography. And they want, the best explanation, not like a totally, well, that could happen. Well, it could happen, right? We want like the most likely explanation, okay? Because remember, this is the AP exam. So you pick your choice and then it goes and it gets scored. Once you you're not going to find out which ones you missed. You're not going to be able to take your score and present it to the teacher and go, well, this is what I meant by my answer. And, that technically could happen, and that's what I was thinking about. You don't get to provide any rationale why you chose the answer, right, on the AP exam. You just have to pick a choice, and that's your choice, right? So you want to pick the very best choice, the most likely choice, the most, common choice or for island for this topic, which would be island biogeography. Could there be an island that's very far away that has lots and lots of species because whatever happened? Sure, that's totally possible. It's not without the outside the realm of possibility. Is it the most likely or the best choice? No. Okay, so just think about that when you're doing the AP exam. The B says the average would decrease because fewer species would have migrated directly to the farther island. I like this one. I'm not sure if it's the right one because I haven't read the other two, but I like this one, so I'm going to put a star next to it. The next one says the average would not change because it's likely the additional island has about the same number of species that migrated as the original island group. Okay, that's not really what we talked about up here, and that's not really what we expect to happen, right? So we can't go, well, yeah, that does sound really good. They have a point there, right? No, we have an idea of what we want the answer to be, and we're looking for an answer that meets what we think it should be, right? Because we know about island biogeography, and we're confident in our studying and our knowledge of environmental science, okay? So the average would not change. I don't like that one. Okay, so I'm going to cross that out. And D says the average would not change because the island is approximately the same size as those in the original group and therefore just as likely to recruit species from the mainland. Size has nothing to do with how many species are going to come out there, okay? I mean, I guess it could have a little bit because if you have like this huge island, you're more, the species are more likely to hit that island than, keep floating along in the sea, but it's not, it's not a big indicator. If they're all about the same size, that's not going to be it, right? It's much farther away, okay? So I don't like that one either, remember, because I wanted it to have fewer species. So now that was the last choice, so I'm going to look back at my choices. Okay, so I've got something crossed out in 3 of the 4 choices, and I have a star next to one of them because I like that one. Now, after I read B, I read C and D I wasn't really thrilled with either. So I'm going to choose B as my answer, right? Because I thought it was a good answer, but I wanted to read the other 2 just in case. And after reading the other 2, I realized B is definitely a lot better. So that's kind of how these analyzing text type questions are supposed to look on the AP exam in 2020. Again, I really wanted to give you an idea of my thought process when I answer multiple choice questions because a large part of a multiple choice test is knowing those test-taking strategies and those test-taking tips, okay? And you can use that for any type of multiple choice. Please use it for the ones in our class. Your scores might go up. So anyway, I hope that was helpful discussion about island biogeography and how, or not exactly just island biogeography, but these types of multiple choice questions and how to kind of approach the multiple choice section on the AP exam. Now, let's talk about the oceanography class. In the oceanography class, we are going to be working on the analyzing or the mapping the ocean floor lab, and this is the one where I was saying when I actually recorded the video where I worked through the lab, I actually thought the graph was really cool. And again, that could be, the nerd in me, but I thought it was really neat. So anyway, I'm going to turn off my microphone and I'm going to play the video I recorded for you to help you kind of walk you through this lab just to make it a little easier for you. So today I want to talk to you guys about the mapping